Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webcast on adapting energy efficiency to climate commitments in state policy. I'm Emily Levin with VEIC, and I'll be the moderator for this session. We'll start this webcast with a few housekeeping announcements and then quickly move on to our presenters, followed by Q&A if time allows. First and foremost, thank you to all our sponsors and ally members for their support of this conference at ACEEE. Attendees are in listen-only mode. Please use the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions of the presenters. As moderator, I'll be sharing your questions with the presenters following the presentation as time allows. Otherwise, we'll continue the Q&A in a Zoom chat discussion after the session. Watch for the Zoom link to be posted in the chat during this session or download it from the resources section. Please refrain from using the chat for any dialogue other than asking questions. We'll be over here in this group until around 3:15, and then we'll shift over to the Zoom for those who are interested from about 3:15 to 3:35. If there's an attendee you would like to connect with, please use the attendees link on the left-hand side column of the platform. All registrants are listed alphabetically. Also on the left side, you can find a resources section. Resources contain a copy of the program in PDF format, an attendee list, Zoom links for all chats and discussions, and an evaluation form that we ask everyone to complete. Anyone who completes the evaluation and includes their name and testimonial will receive a $25 discount to attend the 2023 conference on energy efficiency as a resource in Philadelphia. All presentations will be available for on-demand viewing within a few days on this engagement hub. Presenters' PowerPoints can be found on their page in the program participant section. Before moving to our distinguished panel of speakers, we're going to attempt to play the video that was supposed to play before we started. So I'll pause here for a moment. Welcome back. And now I'm excited to introduce our distinguished panel of speakers on this really important and timely topic. Weston Berg of ACEEE, Mike Schuster of the Institute for Electric Innovation, or IEI, and Mohit Chhabra of the Natural Resources Defense Council, or NRDC. We'll start with our first speaker, Weston Berg. Weston conducts research, analysis, and outreach on efficiency policy areas, including utility regulation, state government policies, and building energy codes. He also leads development of ACEE's annual State Energy Efficiency Scorecard Report and State Energy Efficiency Policy Database. Weston will discuss how energy efficiency is critical to meeting state climate goals. Over to you, Weston.
Great, thanks, Emily. Terrific. Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm Weston with the ACEEE State Policy Team. So I think my presentation here will be a bit, high level macro, just to kick things off, covering a pretty wide range of topics to kind of address the intersection of efficiency with state climate policies. But hopefully it'll be a good table setting from Mike and Mohit's presentations, which we'll dive a little bit more into the tricky details of how these are playing out at the utility level. So I'll just jump right in with a bit of background on the current policy landscape. We've had a pretty eventful year for state policy, to say the least. No shortage of frustrations, but also definitely a lot to celebrate. We've seen a continued surge of states passing and updating climate goals, including strengthening goals to decarbonize the power sector, but also goals to reduce emissions economy-wide as well. And there's a few of the more recent signature state climate laws listed here. Washington's Climate Commitment Act, which creates a new cap and invest market. Massachusetts' Next Generation Roadmap Law, which was set a 2050 net zero goal with a wide range of efficiency provisions, like appliance standards and a call for a net zero stretch code. And now, just in the past month or so, we've had another huge bill in Illinois, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, also adding a new goal to decarbonize the state's power sector. And as one might expect, ACEEE is very interested in the efficiency aspect of these signature climate bills and what degree they're articulating the role that efficiency can play in assisting these goals. And this map here just is intended to show in purple the states that have an energy efficiency resource standard, but also a lot of the states that have clean emissions reduction goals, clean electricity goals, to kind of show that states are adopting efficiency standards along with these climate goals, and they can work together. So I just wanted to briefly discuss a couple of research projects that we've worked on in the past year or so. One was I worked on with my colleague, Emma Cooper, which was to review some of these huge state clean energy and climate laws and how they're addressing energy efficiency. Is it included? How is it included? And for that, we specifically looked at states with strong goals to reach 100% carbon-free electricity in the coming years, and also states that are looking beyond the power sector with statewide emissions goals. So this was intended for more of a general policymaking audience, but these were types of questions we asked. How are energy saving programs and efficiency included in these big signature climate policies? To what extent? And based on that understanding, what steps can policymakers take to make sure efficiency is being leveraged in a systematic way to help speed and reduce the costs of meeting these goals. So in our review, we catalog state climate goals for in essentially two policy buckets, those with 100% clean electricity standards for the power sector, which was just 15 as of a couple of months ago when we published. Now it's up to 17 with the welcome additions of Illinois and North Carolina. So our paper is kind of already a bit out of date, which isn't a terrible problem to have. But we also looked at the 24 states in DC with multi-sector emissions reduction goals. And I won't list all the numbers here, but generally we found that it's a mixed bag when it comes to these laws articulating the role of energy savings. With some exceptions, efficiency doesn't typically get much mention in these very large climate packages, and in a number of cases it's not really even mentioned at all, which potentially highlights that efficiency doesn't really have a central place at the table all the time, or it's being addressed in a piecemeal fashion or as an afterthought. Only really a small handful of these policies specify discrete efficiency goals or sub-targets within these laws, which isn't necessarily critical that they be formally integrated into a clean energy goal, but the fact efficiency isn't being called out in these climate laws is worthy of concern, since there could be missed opportunities to ensure clean energy and climate targets are achieved and done so equitably. So it's also worth highlighting the wide range of benefits that energy efficiency provides that can directly support these climate goals. Each one is a critical value stream for policymakers and utilities. Number one, it reduces emissions both indirectly by reducing electricity demand, as well as directly by cutting fossil fuel use in home heating and vehicles. Efficiency lowers the cost of integrating renewables by reducing the overall amount needed. And when combined with DER and other load flexible technologies, it can further optimize grid performance. Third, it helps to facilitate electrification by lowering costs at the utility scale by reducing overall demand, as well as for customers by right-sizing equipment to meet smaller loads. And fourth, and really this should probably be listed first, efficiency can make the transition more equitable, given that economically distressed communities spend a larger share of their income on energy than others. And by ensuring investment extends to these communities, you can also ensure program benefits extend to all households. So for this particular report, we covered a broad menu of policy measures that states either are or should be taking to support climate goals with energy efficiency, which generally fell into three categories within the report. Those savings supporting power sector clean electricity goals, which this slide generally covers. We also looked at efficiency supporting economy-wide emissions goals, as well as policy supporting equitable decarbonization. And the major driver for most states when it comes to utility savings really continues to be adoption of an energy efficiency resource standard, currently in place in 27 states, consistently shown to be the difference maker when it comes to savings. EERS states continue to achieve around 3 to 4 times the savings on average compared to those without one. Generally, we found states keep their clean electricity goals and efficiency standards fairly separate, with a few exceptions, such as Virginia and Arizona, which both have included savings sub-targets in their recent clean energy packages. Other states like Massachusetts and now Illinois call for a separate target setting process to be kind of ironed out separately. And that separation is fine. It allows for simplicity and flexibility to adjust savings targets on different timelines as conditions change. Other important utility reforms include accounting for the time value and locational value of savings with of energy efficiency as a grid resource, incorporating that within cost-effectiveness screening practices. California and Massachusetts are a couple states that are good to call out in terms of they're looking at hourly and seasonal end-use load profiles. Also updating rate design and data access in ways that create clear price signals and shape energy use to help match to the availability of renewable sources, which, if well designed, can have sizable impacts on peak demand as well as bill savings. And this will be even more important as EVs become more prominent with their projected impacts to peak demand. Rate design and managed charging programs will be really key tools. Although currently we've seen only 11 states that are offering managed charging programs. But then there's also the role of energy efficiency in addressing the 70% of emissions that are produced beyond the power sector, including transportation, which accounts for, of course, a huge chunk, a third of emissions. EVs offer a huge opportunity here, but still only account for 2% of the current vehicle market. And according to our recent EV scorecard, only about 7 states have actually adopted or signaled to adopt light-duty EV targets. We're also seeing a small but growing number of states adopt California's zero emissions vehicle program. Virginia, Minnesota, and Nevada have been a few of the latest states moving in that direction. But this also requires the infrastructure and charging capabilities to be in place. And we're seeing states increasingly look to expand that infrastructure through utility plans, but also EV-ready requirements and building energy codes, notably in progress in California. But then we also can't afford to overlook policies to reduce vehicle emissions more broadly, given EVs will continue to represent only really a fraction of cars on the road by 2030. So policies targeting reductions in total vehicle miles traveled through public transit, as well as transit-oriented development. And really currently only 9 states have adopted specific VMT reduction goals. And then also I should mention continuing to prioritize natural gas energy efficiency. Studies have found that natural gas use needs to really fall by 50 to 100% by 2050 if the country is expected to meet net zero emission goals by mid-century. And as long as natural gas is continued to be used, which is still use is expected to continue to grow through the coming decades. Maintaining investment in weatherization and appliance standards will really be critical. So we've also been tracking states that have been updating and evolving their ERSs and fuel switching policies to remove barriers to decarbonization. Traditionally, these standards have been pretty resource specific, usually one for electricity, one for gas, but a growing number of states are revising these goals to take a more holistic look to enable electrification. Until last year, New York and Massachusetts have really been the only states that have made the shift towards a total fuel neutral BTU goal that captures all savings. But now just this year, we've seen several states announce similar policy reforms. California recently announcing fuel substitution goals starting next year, and Illinois and Minnesota both becoming the first two Midwestern states to allow incentives for energy efficient fuel switching under certain conditions. So this is a map from our inaugural fuel switching policy brief that we released last spring, slightly revised given some important climate laws that passed this year in Minnesota, Illinois, and Colorado. So this was our first stab at capturing the current landscape on fuel switching. I think the main takeaway is that these policies are still very much in their infancy. As you can see, a lot of these states are mostly either in gray or brown, indicating that either they've yet to meaningfully address the fuel switching question in policy, or they actually have specifically prohibited ratepayer dollars from being used on fuel switching. And our current count has 10 states with actual prohibitions and 20 that actually haven't really addressed the question much at all. So there's really a long way to go in terms of achieving these reforms. But we're planning a new update of this policy brief fairly soon, hopefully in the next couple months. So definitely stay posted. And then there's also the critical importance of these policies in terms of advancing equity, which is also a plug for tomorrow's half-day workshop, I believe, on measuring and tracking equity. Low-income and environmental justice communities have really long suffered from structural inequities in land use, transportation, and energy planning decisions. They commonly face both higher home energy burdens as well as transportation energy burdens than the wider population. They're also more likely to live in areas with higher exposure to air pollution, and are also likely to have less access to transit options. So, given these past patterns of inequity, as well as present barriers to program participation, states are increasingly recognizing the need to incorporate equity into these climate plans to ensure that these benefits extend to everyone. Given that ensuring a complete clean energy transition also requires participation from everyone and doesn't result in shifting costs or pollution to marginalized communities. So, so the report also highlights a range of current and emerging equity strategies, which is also a major focus of ACEEE's work this year, which is we'll be working to integrate quite a few more equity-focused metrics into a lot of our scorecard work, not just state scorecard, but also some of our utility and local scorecards. So we're looking at states and how they're addressing investment carve-outs, set-asides, goals, and funding streams to ensure these programs extend to all customers. New York and California are a couple of good examples. Both have set-asides for EV programs and EV infrastructure in economically distressed communities. And we've also tracked roughly 20 states or so that have established savings or spending carve-outs for utility efficiency programs. And there's also other states that are recognizing the health benefits of these programs as well, and that some of the oldest homes that would benefit the most are not being served due to structural issues. And Minnesota's ECO Act from this year is a good one to highlight that tries to address this by allowing a portion of funds to be spent on pre-weatherization measures like asbestos remediation and updating old wiring. So this is just kind of my wrap-up slide, and I think I'm kind of at time, but I just wanted to leave it at there. There are ample opportunities for states to step up their efficiency efforts to meet these climate goals. Efficiency should really be deployed as part of a suite of strategies to support the clean energy transition. And it's really important that these policies, recognize, the time and locational value of energy savings. And looking, more to the distant future, as fossil fuel generation is phased out, and low-cost renewable energy occupies a larger portion of the grid. Some of these carbon benefits might, decline relatively, but energy efficiency will continue to provide a number of different critical value streams, including grid stability, reliability, customer bill savings, safety and comfort, and as well as job creation. And all these need to really be valued, especially in addressing those customers that have been historically underserved. So with that, I'm hoping that that's at least some helpful background at the kind of the 50,000 foot level. But I guess I'll pass it off to Emily to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Weston. That was great as an overview. As a reminder, we'll be taking questions at the end of the session after hearing from all three presenters, but please during the session and as we go, please feel free to post your questions in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll collect them as they come up and address them at the end. Our next speaker is Mike Schuster. Mike is Manager of Research and Partnerships at the Institute for Electric Innovation. In that position, he assesses the role of new technologies in the electric power industry with a focus on rethinking energy efficiency as a carbon resource, developing 24/7 carbon-free solutions for corporate customers, and engaging residential customers with technology. Mike will take a look at rethinking utility energy efficiency and demand response programs as carbon resources. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Emily. Can you hear me all right?
Sure can.
All right. I also want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today, and the other panelists, Weston and Mohit, for teaching me a bit more on this topic. So today I'm going to give a brief overview about what we do at the Institute for Electric Innovation, and then I'm going to share some of the trends explaining what I mean when I say that we need to rethink energy efficiency and demand response programs as carbon resources. And I'll wrap up with examples of how electric companies are innovating in response to this need. So the Institute for Electric Innovation is a 501c3 foundation focused on advancing the adoption and application of technologies to transform the grid. Our members are investor-owned utilities, and we're governed by a management committee of electric company CEOs. In addition, we have a select group of technology companies on our Technology Partner Roundtable to help share information, ideas, and project results to regulators, policymakers in the electric power industry. And so for the past few years, we've really homed in on the customer experience and how to advance solutions and services offered by electric companies. And today, from the research and dialogues that we've hosted, I'd like to share why rethinking of demand-side management programs as carbon resources is vital to decarbonizing the grid quickly while ensuring the reliability and cost-effectiveness of this transition. And really, for the past decade, IEI has been tracking energy efficiency program expenditures and savings trends. And luckily for us, just a couple weeks ago, the EIA released new data on the US EE and DR programs for 2020. And so using this database of information in EPA's greenhouse gas equivalencies calculator, we estimate that these programs avoided enough electricity to power 26 million homes, and we avoided 164 million metric tons of CO2. But rather than compare these programs versus their historical performance, I believe that this slide here represents a more accurate way we as an industry need to conceptualize the impact. Most commonly, when people hear the words, well, I should say, maybe not this audience, but more broadly, when the general public hear the words energy efficiency, They think of utility bill savings, maybe insulation, maybe LED light bulbs, and they're right, but rarely do I find the general public first think decarbonization. Yet, based on EIA data, electric company funded EE programs accounted for 75% more savings than the amount of electricity generated by solar, and 2/3 of what wind energy produced. And now, of course, my claim is not that energy efficiency is better than solar, wind, storage, or other vital technologies, but rather we must use all of these carbon efficient tools and technologies together to build an equitable, decarbonized, and resilient energy ecosystem. And so this notion right here is what led us to dive deeper into rethinking energy efficiency as a carbon resource. And so last year, in partnership with technology companies, we published a report to explore why achieving decarbonization goals and managing an increasingly dynamic grid will require more efficiency and increased demand flexibility. We realized that while successful to this point, policies that have supported energy efficiency programs for decades will not support the role that these programs must play to achieve a carbon-free economy. And one of the key barriers that we came across was the need to align and harmonize electric company EE program goals with state climate goals. And Weston did a great job giving us an overview of this with fuel neutral and avoided carbon emissions from SMUD. And I'm excited for Mohit to dive deeper on this with the total benefit system approach. And more recently, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was excited to read Brattle and Oracle's study, The Customer Action Pathway, which dives a bit deeper into the role of DSM programs to meet climate action plans. And in summary, this study supports that customer-led actions, which include DSM programs, behind-the-meter solar, and EV adoption, have the potential to reduce GHG emissions by nearly twice as much as supply-side reductions alone will contribute under existing policies. And within these customer-led actions, residential electric and gas energy efficiency have the greatest impact through 2030, reducing emissions by 158 million metric tons from today. EV adoption then becomes the leading customer action through 2040. And so now that I've discussed why we should rethink of energy efficiency and demand response programs as carbon resources, I'd like to share examples of how electric companies, many of which in partnership with technology companies, are doing this today. So part of Southern California Edison's pathway to enabling a clean energy future focuses on helping customers make cleaner energy choices. And to this end, SCE partnered with the University of California and Cal State University on a $20 million clean energy optimization pilot, funded through the state cap and trade revenue. And so the goal of this program is to incent incremental and persistent GHG emissions reductions and allow customers to choose and implement technology solutions that best suit their needs, whether that be energy efficiency, demand response, on-site renewables, clean transportation, or energy storage. And what was really exciting is that universities are great partners for this kind of pilot because they have a wide range of residential, commercial, and industrial buildings that are representative of many of the customer types that a utility works with. And in year one, 5 of the 7 campuses reduced GHG emissions, earning a total of $4.6 million in incentives. So next, focusing more on residential customers, we believe that advances in pre-enrolled smart thermostat programs showcase the triple win, providing savings to all customers, improving reliability and resiliency to the grid, and reducing carbon emissions for the environment. And so in summary, this program, APS is working with Google Nest and Uplight using EE and DR program incentives to offer promotions for nearly free smart thermostats that are pre-enrolled onto APS's Cool Rewards program at the point of sale. And as of Q2 this year, 37,000 residential customers were enrolled, providing up to 40 megawatts of flexible load and avoiding dispatch of less efficient and less environmentally friendly generators. But my favorite result of this program so far is that it has an incredible 95% customer retention rate, right? So this is working for customers. Another important component to scaling these programs is using smart meter data to develop a portfolio of flexible DSM programs that can meet the needs of every individual customer. And so Portland General Electric has partnered with eSource to apply data science to customer data. And the Peak Time Rebate Program has enrolled nearly 100,000 customers, which is about 12% of PGE's residential customers. And what they're seeing is that a small portion of the customers enrolled are making up a majority of the program's impact. And when you target this subset of engaged customers while figuring out new programs to support the customers that aren't as engaged, you start to see incredible results. For example, the predictability of load reduction during a peak event used to be, within a range of plus minus 50%. And now it's within a range of plus minus 10%. And so with this more predictable estimate, PGE can start using the Peak Time Rebate Program as a dispatch resource to help manage the grid. And for my last example, I want to emphasize that when given the opportunity, residential customers want to be engaged in managing their carbon footprint. And so the DTE Insight app, with the support of Powerly's Energy Bridge hardware, is a self-serve tool for customers that securely shares real-time consumption data to customers and offers personalized insights on bill and budget management, advanced rate coaching, and disaggregated load management for different end uses. And so specifically during the early stages of this pandemic, this app proved to be a critical tool to meet the rapidly changing customer needs. And so the average number of app downloads increased by over 50% in the months of March and April of 2020. And with these real-time insights, on average, customers are opening the app 14 times per month for more than 2 minutes at a time, which is pretty unheard of for this industry. And so many of these customers, when given the awareness and control over their carbon footprint and energy, are seeing at least a 5% energy savings. So in conclusion, we must understand energy efficiency and demand response to be a part of the carbon efficient tools and technologies currently available to enable us to control not only how much energy is consumed, but when and where. And the policies that have supported these programs for decades may not support the role that these programs must play to achieve a carbon-free economy, but we have the technology proven today to ensure that these programs maximize carbon reduction, bill savings, and reliability. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Now we will hear from Mohit Chabra. At NRDC, Mohit focuses on affecting policy to accelerate the transition to a sustainable and clean energy future. He provides analysis and strategic guidance to policymakers and other stakeholders at the state, regional, and national level. Mohit is currently working on developing cost-efficient pathways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from California's rapidly transforming electric grid. He's a voting member of the Regional Technical Forum and also part of the Conservation Resources Advisory Committee, both of the Pacific Northwest. He's based in Portland, Oregon, and affiliated with NRDC's San Francisco office. Mohit will be talking about some very innovative work in California to develop a total system benefit metric. Over to you, Mohit.
One second, Emily. It's not letting me share my PowerPoint. Voila. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending. I'm going to be speaking about a new metric that better helps align California's energy efficiency goals with the energy system and climate policy needs. So traditionally, utilities and regulators have worked to determine least cost ways to meet energy needs through energy efficiency. Adding climate goals to the mix requires them to do that while reducing carbon. What that means is energy efficiency must do two things: meet energy system needs and displace emitting resources like gas and coal power plants at a lower cost than alternative options. And these other options include renewables mostly. In a high renewable grid, the value of energy savings varies with time, primarily because renewables provide cheap carbon-free electricity, and it's hard to compete with value at that time. And an illustration of that is shown on this slide. Here I have two charts for you. One shows sort of the average value of saving a megawatt hour in each month of the year, and the other shows a typical September day and the average value of saving energy, a unit of energy, in each hour. And both of these are for Northern California, PG&E. The takeaways from these charts are, first, that the value of saving energy varies significantly with time. Secondly, I'd like you to take in the different stacks of values that energy efficiency provides. Those include saving the price of energy that is avoided when you save energy, transmission and distribution benefits, capacity benefits, the value of saving carbon, and so on. And collectively, I refer to them as energy system and policy benefits. Energy savings also is more valuable when thermal generation is on the margin and or the grid is capacity constrained. By this, I mean that when you save energy that displaces a power plant running, or when demand for electricity is very high, the value of energy savings is much higher than other hours. And that's shown in these charts. Also, the location of energy savings is becoming more important as well, as energy efficiency is being applied in some jurisdictions to try to displace distribution system upgrades. But we have less information on locational variation, and for reasons I'm happy to discuss at another time, it's also harder to figure out and implement. The disconnect here is that goals, tracking, and accounting of energy efficiency is all done in terms of annual energy savings. Now, this annual energy savings doesn't capture the time varying location or carbon-free value of energy efficiency. So this provides strong reason to move to a new metric. And that's where the total systems benefit metric, or TSB, comes in. So TSB is the dollar value of the total energy system and climate policy benefits. You can think of it as the product of time varying measure savings and avoided costs, summed up through the measure lifetime. For those of you mathematically inclined, here's a neat little equation to show how a TSB is determined. And this figure, which I've taken from the CPUC's documentation, shows how the TSB is calculated as the product of hourly avoided costs, so that's the total benefits of energy efficiency in each hour, multiplied by the load shape of the energy efficiency measure. Note that the total systems benefit, or TSB, implicitly contains all energy system benefits, energy capacity, T&D, and it also contains carbon value once you value carbon and add it to the stack of avoided costs. So when you multiply a measure load shape to avoided costs, you automatically see those measures that save energy in critical hours where the grid is constrained or where there's a lot of potential to save carbon. They see a much higher value than other measures. This example helps showcase that. So these are 3 sample measures in Southern California Edison. And you can see that their life cycle energy savings is pretty similar. But when you calculate the dollar benefit they provide through the TSB, you see that the first measure, a fan controller for air conditioners, has a much higher benefit because this saves energy during those critical peak evening hours. And per kilowatt hour saved, the benefit that this measure provides is 3 to 4 times other measures. And all of these 3 measures would be considered cost effective otherwise. So this is an example to showcase how setting goals and measuring progress in terms of a total systems benefit not only encourages saving carbon, but it also encourages those measures that provide utility customers, all ratepayers, with the most value. The California Public Utilities Commission, through a recent decision, adopted the TSB to set goals and track accomplishments starting in 2024. And programs are required to start tracking TSB now, but it's going to be the official metric in 2024. This is also part of a broader decision that rethought how energy efficiency portfolios are structured and segmented them into 3 subcategories: a resource portfolio, a market transformation portfolio, and an equity portfolio. This better allows regulators to connect different disparate policy goals with energy efficiency program rules and tracking metrics. So the TSB that I point out is primarily going to be used for the resource portfolio where energy efficiency competes with other supply side resources to meet energy needs and reduce carbon. Now, if your region has sufficiently time varying and regularly updated avoided costs, then it has everything it needs to develop a TSB. On that note, there's been some confusion between the TSB and the TRC. Both have 3 alphabets, both start with T, both rhyme, but please don't confuse them. One's a tracking metric and the other is a cost effectiveness test. By including a carbon valuation in your avoided costs, the TSB aligns energy efficiency with climate goals because it automatically values those measures more that save more carbon. But the key is that you need to incorporate a carbon valuation in your avoided costs. There are 2 common ways to do that. The first is called the marginal abatement cost or a state policy compliance cost, which means how much do your state's laws value carbon? How much money do you need to spend to reduce carbon? And you can incorporate that in your avoided costs. The second is a societal cost of carbon, which is a measure of how much damage would be done by additional units of carbon if they were to be emitted. There's a lot of detail to how to effectively use either of these 2 values, and that's likely a topic for a future presentation or a separate discussion or Q&A later. Some other benefits of the TSB are all distributed resources can be expressed in value through the TSB in exactly the same manner. So it breaks silos between efficiency, demand response, electrification, and etc. So you can set consistent goals across all DERs and offer programs and measure total benefits for all programs using the same metric. Also helps combine energy efficiency and demand response measures together. It puts focus on measures that provide the most value to utility customers. And as I showed with that example earlier, that's different than meeting annual energy savings goals in the easiest possible manner while maintaining some minimum cost effectiveness threshold. It encourages research and evaluation on measure load shapes. Focus on annual energy savings goals focuses research and evaluation for that and for realization rates based on annual energy savings goals. But moving to a TSB makes what matters more transparent. You need to do better research on load shapes and measure lifetimes. It also allows incorporation of future policy benefits, such as air quality impacts, into the TSB. As long as you can quantify them and included them in the avoided costs, they flow into the TSB. The TSB explains value of efficiency in a high or all renewable grid. And a lot of value would come from renewable integration, saving providing capacity value or reliability value and reducing transmission and distribution strain. That being said, please feel free to email me questions. That's my email address. The link in this presentation that'll be shared with you has a link to the papers that I wrote that informed the formation of the TSP and the recent decision on EE portfolio changes to segment it into 3 parts. And as a final reminder, here's a link to join the Zoom meeting later. I'll pause there for a second and let you all note it down before my screen sharing rights are taken away. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mohit. And we decided to put it up here because it seems like the link is not staying up. And for those who are seeing it on the right, I wanted to note that the link is cut off. So please use the one that's popped up at the bottom of the screen or is on Mohit's PowerPoint link. And we'll look forward to moving over there in a few minutes for more of an informal discussion for anyone who's interested. In the meantime, we do have some time now. So if you have questions, we'll stay over here for a few more minutes and you can submit your questions using the Q&A tool on the toolbar before we move over to the Zoom. I see we have one question. How do you determine what resource is on the margin when determining whether a particular hour has carbon savings? This is a question for Mohit. Do you look at the most expensive resource, the most carbon emitting resource? And if the utility says it's must run, is it on the margin if it won't actually be displaced? A great question.
Yeah, fantastic question. So before I answer that question, Emily, is it fine to stop sharing my screen or?
Yes, I think that's fine. It looks like the link is staying up on the bottom, so hopefully people are getting it there.
All right, and I'm going to stop sharing and reappear here. Thank you. So there are a few different ways of doing this, and my experience is rooted in California and somewhat biased, and I will tell you how we've done it here. So the first way is to look at wholesale energy prices and use that to impute what resources are on the margin. Because wholesale energy prices, the clearing prices are driven by the most expensive resource that bids in any hour, you can usually impute whether renewables are on the margin, gas or coal. The second way to do it is, and this is where California is moving, is once you figure out what resource mix is needed to get to your carbon goals, you can then do what's called a production cost model of the grid. So it simulates all resources running, meeting future energy load, and tells you which resources on the margin based on a cost optimization. So those are the 2 common ways of doing it. Both require an approach that's transparent, publicly open to feedback, and ideally would require a regulator to work with the utility to make sure that the best data are used and the results are publicly transparent. Thank you.
Another question for Mohit. Can you describe what is going on in September in regards to generation capacity costs being so much higher than the other months in that slide on value over months and hours?
Yeah, so in beautiful sunny California, we've had influx of renewables, and we're a little capacity constrained as we're waiting for a lot of storage to come online. And in summer evening hours, because of recent heat waves, so this is a great example of how climate change impacts energy systems, we've seen greater than expected load in those evening hours. And we're capacity constrained on those hours. It's as simple as that. And in the last couple of years, we've had west-wide heat waves, so that's precluded import energy as well. And because the whole West has been capacity constrained, prices have gone up. And that's when we really need to build more, what we need to build more resources for. So that capacity value you see is sort of a value of the amount of storage that we need to bring online to meet grid needs. And energy efficiency and demand response in those hours is critical.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A, so I think I'll I'll use my moderator prerogative and ask one more question to give people an opportunity to enter any last questions here before we migrate to the Zoom. I was curious, as I've been learning about the TSB in California, Mohit, that it takes really a system perspective. So, and I understand it's not a cost-benefit screening test, but if it were, it would be more like a utility or a program administrator test as opposed to a TRC or societal test, I think, in some ways, in that it's not including the participant non-energy benefits and sort of some of the broader societal benefits. So could you just talk about sort of how you decided to draw the boundary in terms of the metric and the focus on the utility system and the energy system and not on the broader societal or participant benefits?
So if you start from the premise that this sub-portfolio of energy efficiency, so the first key act was segmenting energy efficiency into a resource, an equity, and a market transformation sub-portfolio. And the key task for the resource portfolio really is to get to our energy needs and policy goals that the utilities have in a least cost manner. So because utilities have strong policy goals and mandates to meet carbon reduction and to meet energy system needs in a least cost manner, that metric describes what is it that utilities need to spend money for. If they weren't to do energy efficiency, they would buy other resources to meet their energy needs and carbon goals, which is why the TSB includes all energy system benefits and carbon and methane, because those are all included in our climate policy benefits. It's also flexible. So in the future, if there was a law that said you need to minimize health impacts of air pollution, and that's a utility requirement, the TSB could flexibly incorporate that. So I drew the I came up with a metric that's flexible first, and then drew boundaries at what the law requires the utilities to do in California. And you can think of it as the numerator of the California TRC or the California PAC. And in some jurisdictions where the societal cost test is basically energy system benefits plus carbon, the TSB would equal that, the California TSB. But you're right, there could be other benefits, and it's important to distinguish between benefits that are realized by utility customers in the utility versus private customer benefits. And that's why you need better policy direction to segment what it is you're using energy efficiency for. Is it for utility and climate benefits, or is it for equity and private benefits? Does that help?
Yes, thank you. That's very helpful. Just got a little feedback there. So I think at this point, we will migrate over to the Zoom. I did want to note that if you're not using Chrome, it's possible that you haven't been able to see a place to insert your questions. I know that was happening with me earlier, but no fear. You will have an opportunity on a more familiar platform of Zoom to have a discussion with our wonderful presenters and ask questions in a little bit of a less formal setting. So hopefully folks can see this Zoom link at the bottom of the screen. And at this point, we will close down over here and collectively migrate over there until around 3:35 for those who are interested in continuing this very important conversation in a new place. As we close down here, I'd like to thank all of our presenters for their great presentations and thank all of you for participating and being a little bit patient as we iron out some of the technical difficulties in one of these first sessions of the conference. So thank you so much to Weston, Mike, and Mohit, and I look forward to seeing many of you over in the Zoom.